The sun was high above the Kara Desert. Its light fell like a golden blanket over the endless waves of sand. Each grain shimmered under the heat, and the wind moved them in slow-flowing shapes. There was no tree, no shade, no water, only the sound of dry air moving and the soft crunch of boots pressing into the sand. Thomas walked ahead of the group. He was tall and thin, and his clothes were covered with a fine layer of dust. He held a small scanner in his hand and looked at it again and again. The device showed faint signals coming from deep under the ground. Behind him walked Lena and Marek. Both were tired from the long march, but they kept going because Tomas believed there was something important out here. The Kara Desert had no cities, no farms, no people. It was silent and empty, but the sand held stories older than any human record. For hundreds of years, explorers had tried to cross it and find the lost places buried under it. Some came back with strange stones that did not belong to any known culture. Some never returned at all. Tomas walked. He felt the wind change. It grew warmer, as if the air was coming from the ground instead of the sky. He stopped and looked around. The sand in front of him seemed to ripple like water. At first he thought it was the heat, but then he saw that the movement was slow and steady, almost like breathing. Lena reached him and asked what was wrong. Tomas pointed to the rippling sand. Marek laughed and said it was only the sun playing tricks. But Tomas kept watching. He had been in the desert many times and had seen heat haze before. This was different. The sand was moving in a rhythm. The group set up a small base for the day. They raised a cloth between two poles to make shade and drank water from metal flasks. Tomas could not stop thinking about what he had seen. While Lena checked the equipment and Marek rested, Tomas walked back to the spot where the sand had moved. He knelt down and touched the surface. It was warmer than the surrounding ground. The warmth was steady like the heat from a living thing. He pushed his fingers deeper and felt something hard just beneath the surface. Not rock, not wood. It was smooth like polished stone or metal. He called Lena and Marek over. Together they began to dig with their small shovels. The sand was light and dry, so it moved easily, but it also filled the hole quickly. Every few minutes they had to clear it again. After an hour they had uncovered a flat surface about 2 meters wide. It was made of a strange silver metal that caught the sunlight in sharp flashes. The metal did not rust or scratch under their tools. Tomas ran his hand over it and felt a faint vibration. It was like standing near the heart of a great machine. Marek pressed his ear against it and said he could hear a deep hum coming from below. Lena took out her scanner, but it could not read the material. It only showed a blank space, as if the surface was not real. Tomas walked around the edge of the uncovered metal. It continued under the sand in all directions. This was no small object. It was huge and buried deep. He wondered if it was a building or a machine. Maybe both of them. Sun began to sink lower, and the desert sky turned from gold to red. The heat softened, and a cool breeze came from the west. The team decided to stop digging for the day. They set up lights and took turns watching the site. Tomas volunteered for the first watch. He sat near the edge of the uncovered metal and listened to the faint hum. As night fell, the desert grew very quiet. Even the wind stopped for a while. The stars came out one by one until the sky was full of them. Tomas looked at them and felt the same strange sense he had felt earlier, the feeling that something unseen was watching him, not from the sky. From below, the hum grew stronger in the silence. It seemed to match the beating of his heart. He leaned closer and placed his hand flat on the metal. For a brief moment, he thought he heard something else, a soft sound, like a whisper deep inside the metal. He pulled his hand away, but the sound faded before he could be sure. When Lena came to take over the watch, Tomas told her about the sound. She said maybe he was tired and needed sleep, but her eyes showed that. She believed he had felt something real. They both looked at the dark shape of the metal in the sand and wondered how long it had been there, and why it was waking now far away. A thin line of clouds moved over the horizon, a rare sign of rain in the desert. But Thomas felt no comfort. The Kara Desert was about to give up one of its secrets, and secrets like this never came without a price. Morning came slowly over the Kara Desert. The sun rose in a soft red glow, and the cool air of night began to fade. Thomas woke early and sat up in his tent. He could still hear the faint hum of the metal beneath the sand even from here. It was steady and low, like the sound of distant waves that never stopped. Lena and Marek joined him near the site after a quick breakfast. They drank from their flasks and studied the spot they had uncovered yesterday. The silver metal caught the morning light. In smooth, bright lines, no rust, no cracks, no marks from time. It looked as if it had been made yesterday. Though it was buried under countless layers of sand, Thomas was eager to see more. He picked up a shovel and began to dig again. Lena worked beside him while Marek used a brush to sweep away the loose grains. The sand was still warm from the sun the day before. The deeper they dug, the more of the strange surface they revealed. After 2 hours, they had cleared an area wide enough to walk across. The metal stretched far in every direction. Thomas thought it might be a roof. Maybe there was an opening somewhere. He tapped the surface with the handle of his shovel. It gave off a dull echo, as though there was a hollow space underneath. Marek walked along the cleared edge. He called Thomas and Lena over when he found a faint line in the metal. It was a straight seam about the length of a man's arm. It curved slightly before disappearing. Back under the sand, Lena ran her fingers along it and felt the groove was too perfect to be natural. It was a joint or a door. They began clearing more sand from around the seam. As they worked, the hum grew a little stronger. Thomas felt it through his boots. It was almost like the ground was alive. And, waiting by midday, they had uncovered a wide circular outline. It was a panel set into the surface. At the center was a small hollow as if meant for a hand. Thomas placed his palm over it without pressing. The metal was warm and smooth, and the vibration was steady beneath. I'd hesitated. The desert was quiet except for the whisper of the wind. He looked at Lena and Marek. They both nodded. Thomas took a deep breath and pressed his hand into the hollow. At first, nothing happened. Then a faint light traced the seam in a slow, bright ring. The hum grew into a deep tone that seemed to echo inside their chests. The circle of metal began to sink inwards without a sound. It dropped down and slid aside, revealing a dark opening below. Cool air flowed out, carrying a faint scent like rain on stone. The three of them peered into the gap. A smooth tunnel led down at a gentle slope. Its walls were made of the same silver metal. Soft golden light glowed from thin lines along the edges. It was not bright, but enough to see the way. Thomas felt a rush of excitement and caution. They had found something far older and stranger than any ruin in the desert. He knew they should call their base and report the find, but part of him feared that if too many people knew about it, the place would be taken and studied in ways that might destroy its secret. They decided to explore only a little before making any report. Lena went first with a small lantern in her hand, though the golden lines gave enough light to walk. Marek followed, and Thomas came last, keeping an eye on the doorway behind them. The air inside was cool and still. Every sound they made seemed to echo softly ahead. The walls curved smoothly, without joints or bolts. It felt like walking through the inside of a single-shaped piece of metal. After a short distance, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber. The floor was polished and smooth like a mirror. Tall shapes stood along the sides, covered with a fine layer of dust. They looked like great machines, with long arms and panels covered in unreadable markings. None of them moved, yet the deep hum seemed to come from them as much as from the floor. In the center of the room was something even stranger. A raised platform held a crystal sphere as wide as Thomas's chest. Inside the sphere, a dark shape drifted slowly, as if floating in water. It moved in soft curls and folds like smoke trapped inside glass. Golden light reflected from its surface, making it seem alive. Lena stepped closer but stopped just short of the platform. The air here felt thicker. Thomas could sense it too. It was not dangerous, but it made every breath feel heavy. As if they were standing in the middle of a storm but had not yet broken, Marek walked around the platform. He said there were more tunnels leading out of the chamber in several directions. Each one glowed faintly, just like the one they had entered. It was clear the place was huge. Thomas stood still and listened. The hum was steady, but now he could hear something else, a very faint rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. He could not tell if it came from the machines, the sphere, or the ground itself. After a few minutes, Lena suggested they go back for now. They had seen enough to know this was a discovery beyond anything in the desert. They could bring more tools and light on their next visit. Tomas agreed, but he could not shake the feeling that the place did not want them to leave without learning more. They walked back up the tunnel. When they reached the opening, the bright sun of the desert made them squint. The metal door slowly slid shut behind them without a sound. The seam vanished as if it had never been there. Only the warm, smooth surface remained under the sand. As the three of them stood there, Tomas looked out over the endless desert. The wind had picked up and small ripples moved across the dunes. Somewhere far below their feet, a great machine had just awakened after a long, silent sleep, and it had opened its door to humans first. The desert morning was clear and calm. The air carried the soft sound of wind over the dunes, and the sky was a pale gold in the early light. Tomas stood beside the covered doorway in the sand, his mind still fixed on what they had seen the day before. The image of the crystal sphere and the slow drifting shadow inside. It had followed him through the night. Even in his dreams, he could feel the hum of the place far below. Lina and Marek joined him after breakfast. They had packed extra lanterns and more tools. They also carried a small recorder to capture anything they might find. The doorway still lay hidden under the sand, but Tomas knew where the shallow seam began. When he placed his hand in the hollow again, the same soft light traced the circle, and the metal slid open without a sound. Cool air flowed out of the dark tunnel. It carried the same faint scent of rain on stone. The three of them stepped inside with slow, careful steps. The golden light along the walls seemed to brighten slightly as they entered. It felt as if the place was aware of them. They followed the tunnel down until it opened into the great chamber again. Nothing had changed. The tall, silent machines stood against the walls, their smooth surfaces untouched. By time, the hum was steady, but seemed deeper now, as if it welcomed their return. Tomas walked straight to the raised platform in the center. The crystal sphere rested there, clear and perfect, with no sign of dust. Inside the sphere, the shadow still drifted in slow, curling shapes. It did not move like an animal or a person, but it seemed alive. The more Tomas watched, the more he felt it was watching him in return. Lena moved around the platform, studying the floor and the thin lines of light that ran across it. The lines seemed to join at the base of the sphere, as though the whole chamber was connected to it. Marek examined the machines along the walls. Each had smooth panels with markings that did not match any known language. Some markings glowed faintly while others were dark, and still Tomas reached out and placed his hand on the sphere. It was warmer than the air in the chamber, and the hum seemed to pass into his skin. For a moment, he felt nothing else but the steady beat of the sound. Then something happened. A soft light spread through the sphere, and the drifting shadow inside began to move faster. Shapes formed within it like waves, and then a voice came not through his ears, but directly into his mind. The voice was calm and slow. It told him it had waited for the return of the builders. It spoke of a time long before the desert, when the world was green and full of rivers and forests. It said the builders had created this place to hold the heart of their work. The work was a machine that could weave the threads of time. Itself, Tomas listened without moving. The voice sounded ancient but clear, as if it spoke from a memory that had never faded. It said the builders had gone away, leaving the machine to sleep until their return. It said he was not one of them, yet the machine had opened because his kind carried something close to them. Builders in their own being. Lina saw the light in the sphere and stepped closer, asking if Tomas was all right. He told her quietly about the voice and what it had said. Marek stopped his search and came over, listening in silence. The hum around them seemed to grow deeper, and the golden light on the walls brightened as if the chamber itself was reacting to their presence. The voice returned in Tomas's mind. It said the machine could touch the flow of events. It could turn them back or push them forward. It could heal great mistakes or create new ones. It warned that each change came with a cost that could not be measured until it was too late. Tomas asked why it was telling him this. The voice answered that humans were new to the long life of the stars, but they carried a gift that the builders had once prized. It called that gift the will to change. Without losing the meaning of the past, the sphere grew brighter, and the shadow inside slowed again, curling back into its gentle, drifting pattern. The voice said the choice would not be made now. It said they must understand the machine before they could decide what to do with it. Then the light faded, and the hum returned to its steady, calm tone. Thomas stepped back and felt the air grow lighter, as if some great weight had lifted from the chamber. Lena looked at him with wide eyes, and Marek stared at the sphere as though trying to see the voice itself inside it. They decided to explore the other tunnels before leaving. One tunnel led to a long hall filled with rows of smaller machines. Each was shaped like a tall, narrow column with a smooth surface. When Tomas touched one, it lit up and displayed shifting patterns of light, but no images they could understand. Another tunnel led to a place that seemed to be living quarters, though no furniture or tools remained. The rooms were empty but clean, as if waiting for someone to return. As they walked, the golden light followed them. The hum was always present, a low heartbeat that seemed to guide their steps. There were no signs of decay or damage anywhere. It was as if time itself had been kept away from this place. When they returned to the main chamber, Tomas looked at the sphere once more. He felt that they had only touched the surface of its purpose. The machine was not just sleeping. It was waiting for someone to choose whether it should wake fully. They climbed the tunnel back to the desert. The door closed behind them with the same silent movement, and the seam vanished once more. The sand was already starting to drift over the place where it had been. The sun was high, and the heat pressed down on them. But Tomas felt a strange sense of cool inside his chest, as if the voice had left a part of its calm with him. Lena and Marek were quiet, each lost in thought. They all knew they would return, and they all knew the sleeping machine would be waiting for them deep beneath the sands of time. The desert wind was strong that day. It carried lines of sand across the surface like streams in a dry river. Tomas stood at the edge of the camp, looking out toward the place where the hidden door lay under the dunes. It had been 2 days since they last entered the strange chamber, and he could still hear the hum in his thoughts. It was as if the sound had followed him back into the open world and refused to leave. Lena was writing in her notebook at the table under the shade cloth. She was trying to record every detail of what they had seen, and heard. Marek sat near the equipment, checking the tools they would take back inside. They had all agreed they could not wait too long before returning. The machine below was not something to leave sleeping for too many days. By the time the sun began to drop toward the horizon, they were ready. They crossed the dunes and found the exact spot where the silver seam lay hidden under the sand. Tomas placed his hand in the hollow, and the circle of light traced itself once more. The door sank inward and slid away to reveal the cool air of the tunnel below. The three of them stepped inside, and the golden lines along the walls glowed faintly, as if in greeting. The descent into the chamber felt different this time. The hum was stronger, and the air carried a faint pull, as if guiding them toward the sphere. When they entered the great room, the crystal sphere stood just as before, but its light was brighter. The dark shadow inside was drifting faster like a cloud, moving under a steady wind. Tomas stepped up to the platform and placed his hand on the smooth surface of the sphere. The warmth met his skin, and at once the voice came into his mind again. This time it was clearer and stronger. It said it had watched the builders for thousands of years and learned the patterns of their choices. It said it could see the steps of time like a river branching into many Streams. Some streams were calm and peaceful. Others were broken. With storms and floods, Tomas asked why it had been left here alone. The voice told him the builders had gone to other places far beyond the stars. They had taken their knowledge with them, but left this machine behind to guard the root of their work. It said the machine was a keeper of the first thread of time. From that thread, all other paths grew. Lina was watching Tomas closely, though she could not hear the voice herself. She asked what it was saying. Tomas told her, and Marek every word. Both of them stood silent for a moment, taking in the meaning of it. A machine that could touch the first thread of time was beyond anything they had imagined. The voice continued. It said that time was not fixed like stone. It was soft like clay that could be shaped, but only with care. One wrong touch could change the shape of everything. It warned that even a small change in the past could grow into a great storm in the future. Tomas asked why it spoke to him and not to Lina or Marek. The voice replied that it spoke to all three, but used his mind as the bridge. It said human thought carried the same patterns as the builders, though in a simpler form. Through him, the others could hear its meaning if they listened with care. The sphere's light shifted, and shapes formed in the air above it. Golden lines curved and crossed, making pictures of landscapes that were not of Earth. There were rivers of silver water and mountains that glowed at night. Strange towers rose in valleys lit by a soft blue sky. The voice said these were the worlds of the builders long ago. It said the builders had shaped not only their own time, but the time of many other worlds as well. Marek stepped closer, trying to touch one of the images, but his hand passed through it like mist. The voice told him these were only memories. They could not be touched or changed. It said the future, however, was still soft and open. Lina asked what the cost was if they used the machine. The voice grew quiet for a moment before answering. It said the cost was never the same. Sometimes the cost was small. Sometimes it was beyond all measure. It could be the loss of one life or the loss of an entire world. The machine could not predict it because the act of changing time itself created new paths unseen, even to the builders. Tomas felt a weight on his heart as he heard this. The idea of having such power was both bright and heavy. He thought of wars in history and of lives lost. He thought of mistakes that could be undone. But he also thought of the dangers. The voice had not spoken of rewards, only of risks. The hum deepened and the sphere's light faded back to its gentle glow. The shadow inside slowed its drifting again. The voice said it had given them what they needed. For now, it said more answers would come when they were ready. Until then, it would wait. Tomas stepped back from the platform and felt the air grow lighter. Lina and Marek looked at him. They all knew they were standing on the edge of something far greater than themselves. The machine was not simply a tool or a treasure. It was a choice waiting to be made. Before they left, Marek suggested they look at the side tunnels again. They found new chambers filled with more silent machines. Some looked like they could hold entire maps of worlds. Others seemed to be for shaping or building something. None of them moved, but each gave off a faint light, like the breath of a sleeping creature. When they returned to the main chamber, Tomas looked at the sphere one last time. He felt a quiet promise in the hum. It was not forcing them to act, but it was asking them to remember, to carry its voice with them, even on the surface under the open desert sky. They walked back up the tunnel. The door closed behind them without a sound, and the seam vanished under the sand once more. The wind had already begun to cover the spot with fresh ripples. The Kara Desert was still vast and empty on the surface, but deep beneath it, the voice from before was waiting. And it would keep waiting until the day they made their choice. The morning sun rose bright over the dunes and painted the Kara Desert in deep gold. The wind was soft, but carried the fine grains of sand like a thin mist across the ground. Tomas sat alone on a dune near the camp. He watched the endless horizon and thought about the voice in the sphere. It had spoken of the first thread of time. It had shown images of worlds that no longer existed. and it had warned about the cost of change. Lena joined him carrying 2 cups of warm tea. She sat beside him. Without speaking for a moment, the air was still cool from the night, but the heat was already beginning to rise. Finally, she asked what he was thinking about. Tomas said he was wondering what it would mean to touch the past. He asked if she would use the machine if it was her choice. Lena did not answer right away. She said she did not know because it was too big a choice for anyone to make quickly. Marek came over holding a piece of equipment. It was a small scanner that now carried a faint trace of energy from their last visit underground. He said the readings from the sphere were unlike anything the device had seen before. It was not just power, it was something alive. Tomas and Lena both knew what he meant without him having to explain. The hum they had heard was more than the sound of a machine. It felt like the breathing of something with a mind. By midday, they decided to go back down. The door opened for them, as it always did when Tomas placed his hand in the hollow. The golden light in the tunnel seemed brighter than before, as if the place was pleased to see them again. When they reached the main chamber, the sphere was glowing softly. The shadow inside moved in a slow circle, as though it had been waiting for him. Thomas stepped forward and placed his hand on the surface. Warmth spread into his palm, and the hum deepened. The voice came into his mind at once. It said the machine was ready to show them what it could do. Tomas felt a wave of curiosity and fear. He asked what would happen. The voice told him it could make the desert bloom with life. It could turn the dry sands back into green valleys and clear rivers. It could pull those moments from the past and place them into the present. The golden lines on the floor spread outward from the base of the sphere and reached the walls. The light climbed up the walls and filled the chamber. In the air above, the sphere shapes began to appear. They saw the Kira Desert, but it was not empty. It was covered in grass and trees. Streams of water ran through wide meadows, and small animals moved in the shadows of tall plants. The air looked clear and full of life. Lena stepped closer and asked if this was real. The voice answered that it was a vision of what could be if the thread was pulled from the past into the now. It said the sands could be turned back into what they had once been before the world changed. But the voice also said there would be a cost. The rivers might take water from other places. The plants might drive away the life that now survived in the desert. The balance of the present would be broken. Tomas asked if the machine could bring back people from the past. The voice said it could, but it warned that bringing back a person might change many things around them. A single life could touch thousands of others and shift the path of entire worlds. It said the thread of time was like a web. If one part moved, the rest would move with it. Marek frowned and said it was too dangerous. Lena said it was also too tempting. They could save so many, they could undo so much pain. But Tomas thought about the warning. He remembered the calm but serious tone in the voice. It had not tried to tell them what to do, and it only told them what might happen. The vision above the sphere faded, and the golden light sank back into the floor. The hum became soft again. The voice said they could choose at any time. It said the machine would obey, but it would not choose for them. It said humans must decide for themselves if they were ready for the power of the sands. They explored one of the far tunnels and found a large hall filled with patterns carved into the metal walls. The carving showed lines crossing and branching like rivers, splitting into smaller streams. Some lines ended suddenly, as if cut off. Others bent and twisted before joining again. Tomas realized these were paths of time. Some ended early because of choices. Others stretched far because of changes made long ago. In one corner of the hall was a tall frame that held a clear panel. When Tomas touched it, images appeared. They were moments from the past, not only from Earth, but from worlds they had never seen. Cities that floated in the sky, oceans lit from below by glowing life, mountains that seemed to reach into space. The voice said these were all real, and all connected to the first thread in some way. When they returned to the main chamber, Tomas placed his hand on the sphere one last time for the day. He told the voice they needed to think. He said he understood now why the builders had left the machine sleeping. The voice said it understood as well. It said the strength to wait was sometimes greater than the strength to act. The three of them left the chamber and climbed back to the surface. The desert wind had grown stronger, and small waves of sand rolled across the dunes. Tomas looked out over the empty land. In his mind, he could still see the vision of the green valleys. He could hear the voice telling him that the choice would always be there. But he knew that once the choice was made, there would be no turning back. That night they sat together under the stars. No one spoke for a long time. The desert was quiet except for the wind and the distant call of a night bird. Each of them was thinking about the same thing. The machine could give life back to the desert or bring back the people they had lost. It could change the shape of history itself, but it could also take something away that they could never replace deep below their feet. The hum of the sleeping machine continued. It was patient. It had been waiting for thousands of years, and it would wait until the day humans decided what the power of the sands was truly worth. The wind over the Kira Desert was sharp that morning. It carried the sound of shifting dunes like a low whisper. Tomas stood outside the camp with his eyes on the horizon. He was waiting for Lena and Marek to finish packing the supplies. They had agreed it was time to face the machine again and decide what they would do with its power. For days they had argued in quiet voices under the shade cloth at camp. Lena had spoken of the good they could do. She dreamed of restoring the desert to life and giving water to the dry lands. Marek had warned about the cost. He said the balance of the world was fragile, and no one could predict what would happen if they pulled the thread of time. Tomas had listened to them both and kept his thoughts mostly to himself, but deep inside he knew a choice was waiting for him alone. They reached the hidden doorway by midday. The sand was smooth over it, but Tomas still remembered the exact place where the hollow lay when he pressed his hand into it. The silver circle of light traced itself in silence. The door sank down and slid away. Cool air brushed their faces as they stepped into the tunnel. The golden lines on the walls seemed brighter than before, as if they had been expecting this visit. When they entered the main chamber, the hum was deep and steady. The crystal sphere shone softly in the center of the room. The shadow inside drifted in calm, slow patterns. Tomas stepped forward while Lena and Marek stayed back. He placed his hand on the sphere and felt the warmth spread into his skin. The voice came into his mind at once. It said the time for waiting was over. It said the machine was ready to follow his command if he chose to give one. Tomas asked what would happen if he refused to choose. The voice answered that the machine would sleep again until someone else came. It said the power of the sands would never be lost, but it would remain silent before Tomas could answer. The hum changed. It grew louder, and the golden light along the floor shifted toward the doorway. From the tunnel came the sound of footsteps. 3 tall figures entered the chamber. They were not human. Their skin was a pale silver color, and their eyes glowed faintly in the golden light. They wore smooth plates that looked like armor, and they moved with slow, graceful steps. Lena and Marek stepped back in shock. The tallest of the strangers raised a hand and spoke in a low voice. The words were strange, but the meaning came into Tomas's mind like the voice of the machine. They said they had come for the time engine. They said it belonged to the old races and not to a young species like humans. Tomas stood still. The machine's voice spoke again in his mind. It told him these beings were from one of the ancient branches of the builder's work. They had guarded other machines like this one in far places. They believed that only those who had lived for thousands of years could understand how to guide time. The tallest figure stepped closer to the sphere. He told Tomas to step aside and let them seal the machine forever. Lena whispered to Tomas to be careful. Marek's hand tightened on the tool he carried, but Tomas did not move away from the sphere. He told the strangers that humans might be young, but they learned through their mistakes. He said the builders had chosen to leave the machine here for a reason, and now it had chosen to speak to humans first. He said this was proof that the choice belonged to them now, the silver-skinned. Leader shook his head. He said humans were too quick to act and too slow to see the full path of their actions. He said they would tear the thread of time without even knowing it. Tomas replied that every species had once been young, even the builders. Must have made mistakes before they learned. If humans were never given a chance, they would never grow. Machine's voice was silent for a moment, as if listening to both sides. Then it spoke in Tomas's mind. It said the choice was indeed his to make, but it also said that every choice carried weight, not just for humans, but for all who lived in the web of time. It asked him one last time if he wished to use the machine. Tomas looked at Lena and Mark. He thought about the green valleys. In the vision, he thought about the rivers and the lives that could be saved. He also thought about the cost that might come without warning. He remembered the voice telling him that once the thread was pulled, it could never be placed back exactly. The same, he turned back to the sphere and spoke slowly. He said he would not use the machine. He said the risk was too great and the time was not right. But he also said he would not let it be sealed away forever. It would remain hidden until the viewership day came when someone truly understood how to use it without harm. The silver-skinned beings did not look pleased. The leader asked if Tomas thought humans could protect such a thing from those who would misuse it. Tomas said they would try, and that was all any species could promise. He said the builders had left the machine to wait for the right moment, and that moment was not. Now the hum in the chamber deepened. The golden lines on the floor rose up the walls and surrounded the sphere in a soft glow. The machine's voice said the decision had been made. It said it would return to its long sleep, but it would remember the choice of a human who had been given the chance to act and had chosen to wait. The silver-skinned beings stepped back toward the tunnel without another word. They left the chamber in silence, their steps fading into the hum. Lena and Marek came to stand beside Tomas at the platform. None of them spoke for a while. They simply listened to the fading sound of the visitors leaving the desert. At last Tomas placed his hand on the sphere one final time. The warmth was still there, but softer. The voice said farewell for now. Then the golden light dimmed and the hum sank to a low, quiet rhythm like the slow breath of sleep. The three of them walked back up the tunnel. The door closed behind them, and the seam vanished into the sand. The wind began to cover the spot once more. The Kira desert returned to its endless stillness. Tomas looked out over the horizon. He felt the weight of what had just happened. He had been offered the power to change the world, and had chosen not to take it. It was not a victory or a loss. It was simply the path he believed was right. Far below the sands, the machine rested again. It would wait for another sunrise, another choice, another human to stand before it. And perhaps one day the right moment would come. The sun was just rising over the Kira desert. The air was cool and soft in the early morning light. Tomas stood alone on a dune looking toward the place where the hidden doorway lay far beneath the sand. The events of the last day still echoed in his thoughts. The meeting with the silver-skinned beings, the voice of the machine, and the choice he had made. The desert stretched out before him in endless waves of gold. The wind moved in long, slow breaths across the surface, somewhere far below. The machine was resting again. Its hum was gone from his ears, but not from his memory. He could still feel it like a slow rhythm deep inside his chest. Lena walked up the slope to stand beside him. She carried 2 cups of warm tea and handed one to him. For a moment they watched the horizon in silence. Then she asked if he felt he had done the right thing. Tomas said he believed so. He said the power to change time was too great for any one person or one moment. It needed to wait until the world was ready to carry it without fear or greed. Mark joined them a short time later. He had been checking their gear and making sure their records were safe. He said they should leave soon before the desert heat rose too high. They all agreed, but no one wanted to leave without saying a quiet farewell to what lay below. They walked together to the spot where the doorway had been. The wind had covered it completely. There was no trace of the silver seam, no sign that anything had ever been there. Tomas knelt down and placed his hand on the sand, as if to touch the machine one last time through the earth itself. He whispered a silent promise that it would stay safe. The three of them began the slow walk back to camp. The dunes rose and fell. Before them, like the waves of a golden ocean, the air was clear and still a sound of their boots on the sand. By the time they reached the camp, the sun was high and the heat was already strong. They packed their things in quiet focus. Every tent rope was pulled free, every tool stored away. The camp that had been their home for so many days was folded into a few bags. The desert gave nothing back but the memory of where they had been when the last of their supplies was loaded. Onto the transport, Tomas took one final look at the horizon. He knew others might come here one day, searching for the same signals they had followed. Some might dig without care. Others might come with dreams of power, but he also knew the machine was clever. It had hidden itself for thousands of years, and it could hide again until it chose to be found. The journey out of the desert was long. The wind grew stronger in the afternoon, and the sky filled with thin, high clouds. At night they camped under the stars, far from the place of the machine. The hum was gone now, but Tomas felt no loss. The memory of it was enough. It was a reminder that not every treasure was meant to be used at once. Some treasures were meant to be kept safe until the punto de silos. Right time on the second morning, they reached the edge of the Kira Desert, where stone hills rose from the sand. From here, they could see green valleys in the distance. It was a sharp change from the endless dunes. Marek stopped and looked back one last time before they left the desert behind. He said it was strange to think that beneath all that sand was something so powerful that it could change the course of the world. Lena said maybe that was the point great power did not always have to be seen or used to matter. As they traveled farther from the desert, the memory of its heat and silence became sharper in their minds. They spoke little of the machine. It was not a secret they could share with anyone else. Even if they told the truth, no one would believe it without seeing it, and they could not lead anyone there without risking what they had promised to protect. Weeks later, Tomas was back in the city. The noise and movement of so many people felt strange after the long quiet of the desert. Yet in the middle of the crowded streets, he sometimes thought he could hear a faint hum somewhere deep beneath the ground. It was not real, but it reminded him that the machine was still there, waiting. Lena wrote her notes into a long report that she kept locked away. Marek studied the strange readings from his scanner again and again. None of them could forget the golden light in the chamber or the slow, drifting shadow in the sphere. They knew they had been part of something far greater than their own lives. Months passed, seasons changed. The Kira Desert remained as it always had been. The wind still shaped the dunes. The sun still painted the sand gold each morning and red each evening. Travelers crossed its edges, but few dared to go far into its heart, and none of them guessed what lay beneath their feet. Far below the surface, in the silent chamber, the machine slept. The golden lines along the walls were dim and still. The crystal sphere rested quietly on its platform. The shadow inside moved in slow, gentle patterns like the dream of a living thing. It remembered the human who had stood before it and chosen to wait. It remembered the words that had been spoken about trust and patience. The machine knew the desert would guard it well. The sands would cover the doorway again and again, until the right day came. And when that day came, the hum would rise once more. The golden light would shine again, and another human would stand before the sphere too. Face the same question that Tomas had faced. For now it was enough to rest, enough to let time move forward without its hand guiding the threads. It had waited for thousands of years, and it could wait for thousands more. Above the surface, the desert. Wind carried its endless song across the dunes. The stars watched from the high, dark sky, and somewhere in the quiet heart of the Kira Desert, the sleeping machine kept its promise. Beneath the sands of time, it waited forever.